Let me tell you the tale of Professor Swagelous. Professor Swagelous was trying his best to get good grades and avoid the chaos in town. He came to school on time and paid attention in his classes. He went straight home after school to get a good night's sleep. School was hard, though, for Professor Swagelous. There was quite literally no time between his classes to get to them, and people were always starting fights in the halls, teachers included. One day, Professor Swagelous was trying his best to keep up in PE, but he was already very exhausted from his long day, so he chugged a couple water bottles that were laying around the gym. This was a big mistake. Something in his bowels was very, very upset with him. Lucky for Professor Swagelous, the lunch bell rang, and he had a chance to deal with his urgent matter after he got something else in his system. He didn't want to ruin his perfect attendance record, so after grabbing a bite and making sure to be seen, it was all he could do to physically hold back the inevitable and make a dash for the door. But fate had other ideas. The principal himself stopped Professor Swagelous, insisting on offering him a sketchy-looking cell phone. He tried to refuse politely and break away, but that only made the principal more agitated, and as he screamed, it was finally all too much for Professor Swagelous. What? What? Within seconds of his transgression, an all-points bulletin was put out declaring Professor Swagelous wanted for the crime of defecation, which is a crime in this world. Professor Swagelous tried to run, but it was no use. The math teacher caught him around a blind corner, grabbed him, and suplexed him into the cold hallway tiles. Before he could even get up, another teacher got him in a rear naked choke, and as the light started to leave his eyes, and he worried the last thing he would ever feel were his ruined trousers, the other teacher relented and said that he had been punished enough. Professor Swagelous crawled away. Pants ruined, spine probably broken, and any scrap of dignity he might have had was destroyed. He later collapsed by the vending machine and spent 2 days in the hospital. Welcome to MDickie's Old School. Hey everyone, how you doing? As some of you might know from the community post I made the other day, I was going to do a video about Fortune's Run's early access launch after experiencing what it had to offer so far and accidentally hard-locking myself out of the save for the first level. I decided to give it some more time to develop because if I were to do a video right now, there'd be next to nothing nice to say about it, at least for me, and I don't want to bully an indie that just launched their game. So I decided to get a little weird with it, and I knew exactly what game I wanted to take a look at. Say hello to MDickie's Old School. MDickie is a solo indie dev who's been making games for over 20 years now. You might know him from some of his more infamous games such as You, The Testament, and Hard Time. MDickie mostly makes wrestling or wrestling adjacent games, but when he comes out of that niche, hoo boy, you are in for a treat. And a couple months ago, Matt Dickey blessed us with another batshit insane non-wrestling game, Old School. For all intents and purposes, Old School is indie-fied Bully 2. You're supposed to be in school, but you can do basically anything and everything will happen. I'm not kidding. I've had several of my in-game classes canceled because someone got bored and set their desk on fire. This is the single most combative game I've ever played, and it's not even PvP. There's just regular murder tornadoes at every entryway, every intersection, and also right in front of your house. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. Let's talk about what you're actually going to be doing in Old School. Old School's premise is simple enough. You go to school. You can create your character or pick an existing one that will have various stats and be at a certain grade level. Seems easy enough at first. Go to class, pay attention, try to avoid the constant fighting in the halls. The last one is important. Your stamina is very limited and things like running, training a skill, or taking damage whittles it down pretty fast. Your stamina's gonna wear pretty thin, pretty fast, just going about your day, and you'll need to run if you want to get to your classes on time thanks to there being zero passing period between classes, so if a teacher decides to suplex you, it is very, very bad. You can recover stamina by either sleeping at home or eating stuff, which costs $2 an item but $5 anywhere else. And your allowance is only $5 a day, so you're not going to be able to make a full recovery at lunch or eating stuff outside school unless you somehow find a lot of money. The last thing you want to have happen to your character is they just give out and wake up in the hospital. So what are you actually supposed to be doing? getting your GPA up. Your principal wants you to achieve somewhere between a 3.5 and 3.75 GPA if you want to win and advance to the next grade. You start with roughly 2.5, and it is very easy for that to drop further. The game's not going to so much as give you a tutorial as it is going to have you quite literally showing up to class to learn things you need to do in-game. I'm going to spoil that now since some folks might have a hard time parsing the insanity of an MDickie game. You need to come into your music class with an instrument ready to get your grade up, and if anything, it's best to find a backpack so you can have an instrument on your person at all times, because playing music is the most consistent way to keep your sanity up. If you've got yard, swimming, or gym on your schedule for the day, conserve as much stamina as possible because you're going to need to burn through most of it for those classes. For academic classes, the possible answers for a question are put on the board as your classmates guess them. You need to find and pick up a book that corresponds to the color of the classroom store and interact with it to start getting random answers related to that subject. Eventually, you'll get the one you want, and very rarely will you be missing an answer when it comes time for the test, but it's not impossible for you to be missing answers when it comes time to take the test or if you get called on, so cross your fingers and hope those blank ones are the right one if you don't already know which one the right one is, or just Google it. I don't think there's a time limit for answering questions in the game. So while you're studying, you'll notice that some of your classes increase skills, because of course you have to have skills. This is a video game. It's nothing too crazy, it's just stuff like repeatedly hitting the punching bag improves your attacks, or increasing your agility stat will let you hop fences faster and dodge roll. And like I said, some classes will let you train these while getting course credit. There's other stuff that can be trained like popularity, which is mostly done through doing all those near impossible tasks you're given at random, which I think governs how likely people are to swear vengeance on people who attacked you or just give you things. It's hard to tell at times because so much of this game isn't overtly explained. That being said, it's pretty nice that we're finally getting some proper documentation for an MDickie game, which as I read through the manual, it's pretty thorough with some things, but there's a good deal of stuff you gotta figure out, like the forbidden knowledge. It kinda goes hand in hand with skills because how the game works is that you need to get that grade point average your principal told you to get, or else you get held back a grade or kicked out of school. If you pass, you move up to the next grade and it starts all over again. A full run of Old School will be long. Hell, after you graduate, you can continue playing as a teacher according to the manual. The other thing you're going to need your skills for is avoiding something I like to call the murder tornado. Murder tornadoes are things that happen in any high traffic or tightly spaced area where NPCs gather and overcrowd each other. Eventually, an action is taken from one NPC to another that's deemed as violent, and they start fighting. Eventually, all the NPCs in that area are involved in some way with that fight, and the fight starts to roam around like a destructive tornado of murder. You're going to need to at least get enough agility to be able to dodge roll or hop fences to avoid the murder tornado entirely, and if that doesn't work, you're going to need to have some solid combat skills. Study that manual well. There is one way around the murder tornadoes, which is to try and very carefully drive through them in cars or on a motorcycle. Just be careful though, as you can and will get the thunder brought down on you for reckless driving. So you may have noticed things look a little jank, which frankly I have to disagree. This is pretty dialed in for an MDickie game and shows just how much he's been able to grow as an honest to goodness solo dev over the last couple decades. There's a lot of stuff just happening in Old School in a matter kind of reminiscent of Kenshi, and how just because you aren't there doesn't mean the simulation isn't running. And on that note, I know some of you think you're just the wittiest person in middle school coming in and asking me if literally everything is an immersive sim. And no, Old School is not an immersive sim. It's more of just a sim, and a pretty blurst one at that. You know, trolling used to be a art. Although, now that I think of it too, Sims like City Skyline 2 would be drastically improved if people just started fighting in the middle of the intersection and you could just like watch as the most random stuff happened. Because that's what Old School is all about. Because so much stuff is just going on, stuff that's absolutely bonkers is prone to happening. One time I was trying to get a teacher to call on me so I could answer a question to get my grades up, so I was using my gesture while sitting in my seat. This did not have the desired effect. Instead, my gesturing pissed off the teacher so much that he grabbed my desk, placed it on top of his own in the front of the class, and set the whole thing on fire. But that wasn't enough. He then proceeds to grab me out of my chair and suplex me into the fire to make it clear that he has had enough of my crap. I left class early that day. Another time, I saw just how seriously students take their grades as I watched my classmate hit 0 on stamina but still give answers to questions. And sometimes you're forced to enter the murder tornado, because sometimes your friends will call upon you to aid them in a fight, and after that, all bets are off for whatever you've got planned for the next 2 days. The incident that I retold at the beginning of this video wasn't so much an outlier as it was just a normal thing that happens in this game. Also, just like Hard Time before it, Old School is surprisingly in-depth for something that looks like it does. The school itself is just one part of the game world, and there's other stuff like the town square that's full of stores and stuff, the wrestling arena, whatever's going on in the woods. Oh, and there's also several transit systems, including an airplane, which I think takes you to the beach, but I'm scared to try it based on how things unfold in this game. You could easily do a run of this game without ever going to the school or any classes, although I don't know how well that would go over. One last thing to talk about with this game is that it's probably one of the best MDickie character creators that I've seen. There's just a ton of little options for fiddling around with every part of the character's design and outfit, and you can alter any of the pre-made characters too if you want to see someone but you don't want to play as them. Things can look a little wild too, as it looks like the shape of the clothing itself is just a tweak to the player model, and the style is a texture on top of it. The only thing I really wish it had is the ability to easily tamper with certain textures like faces a la Hard Time, where all the textures in that game were just JPEG files, not even compressed or compiled into anything. I had way too much fun with that back in the day. So that's pretty much it for MDickie's Old School. One more thing of note is that it would seem that MDickie is still adding things bit by bit to the game. He added an arcade back in November, and he added in a new store this month. I don't know how much we can expect the man to add to the game over time, but it's nice to know he's still active with the development. You'll love to see that. Old School is a goofy, lovable gem that, while a little rough around the edges, should absolutely not be underestimated. You can go to school and be a good little noodle, be a menace to the hallways, skip school entirely, or just do what I did and wander around the halls playing music because it's the only way to stave off a mental breakdown. Who would have thought that guitar kids in school were onto something? The game is $14.99, which I think you're gonna know if you're into something like this or not, and if you are, $14.99 is something you'd happily pay to support the madness that is MDickie. If not, well, we'll find you something sooner or later. The most fun part of this game is just letting the simulation run and seeing what wild stuff happens and how it's gonna suck you in. And that'll do her for today. I'd like to ask you to do all those algorithm things like subscribing if you've got the time, and if you really like what I do here and want to help me keep finding the weird stuff without meddling hands of sponsors, I do run a Patreon over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where I've currently got the yearly discount as low as it'll go if you want to get yourselves a year worth of behind the scenes updates, unobstructed 4K cat clips, recipes for our cooking segments, and early videos. If that's not your thing, or you just aren't into recurring payments or Patreon, I do have super thanks enabled for one-time gifts of support, which I always appreciate. If you can't or won't do either of those, it's totally cool. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and maybe someday I'll earn your pledge. In the meantime, let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it drawing, singing, or making really, really wild video games, what you do is not content, it is art. Content is a label that takes all your skills, aspirations, and dreams and grinds them up into a gray slop that is only allowed to exist so long as it makes the line go up. Your art in no way deserves that. Your art is an inalienable reflection of yourself by the very nature of its creation, and you in no way deserve to be reduced to content. So get out there and fight for yourself by fighting against the contentification of everything. Stay saucy, everyone.
He do be laying down. Ooh, he make a noise. This your new home? Our footrest on the couch? Not a couch boy, but a footrest boy? Just letting it all hang out there? Was I interrupting your dreams of snacks? Yeah, sniff the hand. Smell the snacks I just had. All right, I'll leave you to it.